more or less 7 o'clock. I will call this meeting of the City of Fergus Falls Committee of the Whole to order. Can we do a roll call, please?
So Rachel is absent. Kilty?
Here.
Fish?
Here.
Joe?
Here.
Tony?
Here.
Clayton?
Yes.
Freemeyer?
Here.
Mortensen?
Here.
We have a quorum. The first item on the agenda is a discussion regarding the firefighter service benefit, and I will call upon Luke Draxton.
Morning, everybody. Thanks for having me here today. As I understand it, in your materials, you've got the resolution as provided by Fire Chief or the council action recommendation provided a little bit ago, but the request and recommendation is for our Relief Association to, we have to bring this to the city for approval to adjust our pension amount per year of service, and the request is to change it from the current $6,300 per year of service up to $7,200 per year of service. Our board of trustees with Councilwoman Kildy had met a couple of weeks ago to look at our funded ratios, and we're currently at about 155%, which means we've got 55% excess in our asset account to cover all of our liabilities for retiring firefighters. And the intent of our special fund is to be utilized for pension payouts. So when we've got a high funded ratio, we want to get that back down to a more reasonable amount to not be to be utilizing the funds for its main purpose, and that is for the pension amounts for the retirees and upcoming firefighters. So with that, we're a self-supporting organization for our pension. We have not had to request the city has not had a city required contribution since 2010 in total of $60,000. There was 2 years, $36,000 and $24,000 back in 2010 and 2011, and we've been self-sustaining since and prior to that. So the request coming to the City Council for action is an update and increase of $900 per year of service, and that falls well within the range established by state statutes. So I'd be open to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Somebody can make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Laurie. Seconded by Jim. Anybody got any questions for?
Yeah, I've got a question for him, Your Honor. I appreciate it very, very much. Luke, I appreciate you coming today. I come from a long line of firefighters in this city for over 50 to 60 years. In fact, I remember when this was the fire hall right here where we're standing on that end. So I appreciate everything that the fire department does in this city. Appreciate what was done with OLV recently. Spoke with the chief about it, and I want the community to know that much support comes from me. And the question I have for you is, does this affect just upcoming retirees that are going to retire, or does this affect past retirees that are receiving some funds at this time?
Correct. So the increase would be applicable to those that are currently active firefighter members and those retiring in the future. Those that have retired previously and are still in a deferred status, you can't access your retirement pension benefits until age 50. So we have, I think, 11 that are currently retired and in deferred status, and at the time they retire, their pension amount per year of service is locked in at that time. So it doesn't retro back to previous numbers, just the future and current.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Any other questions for Luke? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against, same sign. Hearing none, the motion is approved. Is that okay to go on the consent agenda?
Sure.
We have a nod, so that's a yes. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you.
Obviously, a fire department morning. Call upon Ryan, Fire Chief, Fire Department 2024 Minnesota DNR Volunteer Fire Assistant Matching Grant. And Ryan will talk to us about that.
I'll adjust it when you were done talking. It was a little distracting. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's kind of an update, but also asking for a change in a resolution that was done. I was in front of you all on September 3rd in regards to a DNR award of $5,000. And I say an award is that we were awarded, but we weren't awarded the money yet. And what has happened is the DNR has not received the funding from the federal government on where that money comes from to support the rural fire program. So we've been waiting, and Andrew's been on the emails as well, but about once a month we get an update stating no funds have not been released. And then it was about a week and a half ago we got a notice, another email email that the funds have not been released per an executive order. So that kind of got me switching gears a little bit and reached out to the DNR. We put in for water supply or water movement devices, and that provides to buy a fire skid unit, what we call it, goes on a pickup truck that we use for wildland firefighting. It is a need for us. The grant was nice because anytime you can get something to offset the price of something, we go for it, and it was also a priority item for that grant award. Since it has not been awarded, we have not been able to commit to a purchase because that's part of the rules of the Rural Fire Program grant. So we've been waiting, and every time we get a kick that the money's not released, it moves us out another month. And now we're starting to come up to the spring fire season, and it's something that I would like to get accomplished. So my ask today is if we can use the monies, if we are awarded it, towards our wildland firefighter PPE or personal protective equipment, so jackets and coats, and then allow us to go forward with just making the purchase of the skid unit, so we can hope to get it in at least mid-fire season, that it'll be here and installed on one of our wildland trucks.
Somebody can make that motion.
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Mark. Would somebody care to second it?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mike. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against, same sign. Motion is approved. Okay for the consent agenda?
Ryan? Your Honor?
We closed it, Mark, so
Okay.
we can move on.
Thank you.
To the annual investment review, call upon Bill.
Good morning. Thank you, Your Honor. Council, I laid on your desk here this morning a couple handouts. One is the PowerPoint presentation, and do you want to pull that up? So I'm going to walk through the first portion of this and then turn it over to Mike Hession. He's here from Advanced Capital. And just a little bit on a high level of how the structure works. The City of Fergus Falls, our investments are managed on a daily basis by Galliard Capital Management. That's a professional asset management firm. And then we have an investment committee of the city, which Scott Kwame is on that committee, as well as Andrew, myself, Sandy, and then Mike Hession being our independent investment consultant. And he'll tell you a little bit more about that process too. But this process has been in place since the mid-90s. It has worked well for the city. We have a conservative, we want to have a safe portfolio. That's the goal. So we don't lose principal, and we, have a market rate of return. Again, Mike will go through all of that and his role as an independent consultant, give a little review of that portfolio and the returns. What I want to start with, Lynn, if you want to flip to the next slide, thank you. I want to start going through the funds that the city has and explain to you what they're there for. Why do we have the funds? And there are certain restrictions on some of the funds. Some are unrestricted for cash flow. So the total, and we'll get down to that, is at $52,148,000 about is where we're sitting. We are a bit higher right now than we have been in prior years, but keep in mind overall, we issued the sales tax bonds, put those in to our portfolio, which includes our local liquid funds as well. And we're spending those down on those projects, so we haven't completely expended those, and we'll get to that in here. But I kind of want to walk through line by line today a bit and explain why we have the funds we do and what they're restricted for. So we have two columns, unrestricted operations and then restricted or committed funds. So they're specifically designated. Now, these numbers aren't exactly perfect at this moment because we are in the process of closing our year end. And I'll point out some of them that relate to last year, and then I'll be updating as we prepare for the audit. But the general fund, again, that's our general operating fund of the city. That's where the majority of our operations happen. Your street department, police department, fire department, park and rec, all of administration, community development, all of that falls within the general fund. So we have $10.5 million in that fund right now. You can see unrestricted operations at $7.6 million and about $2.9 million that is restricted or committed. I put some comments off to the right. One thing to point out is we have a $16.1 million 2025 budget for the general fund. We receive our main revenues, taxes and LGA twice a year. So we need funds on hand at the end of the year to cash flow to get when those first tax settlements come in June, and then LGA comes in July. So that's why I wanted to point out what that size budget is. And then we accumulate capital outlay in there of $1.5 million. I'm estimating that right now. And again, that's like for the fire truck. We're putting money aside so when we buy that next truck, we have some money to put down and we don't finance all of it. That in other areas, general government buildings, taking care of City Hall, the senior center, things like that, our tax levy supported buildings. As well as park areas. Police forfeitures and donations, those are specifically restricted according to state law or the donor that gave them. And just to give you a little hope, when we get past the general fund, I will speed it up a little bit, so. But also within, we have a sales tax balance. That was leftover funds when the library bonds were paid off. We transferred a portion of those funds to the Downtown Riverfront project. The balance of $279 came over to the general fund. Those have been committed to go towards the Day Lagoon project. So when you as a city council adopted or approved those bids, we are paying some from the water and sewer funds, as well as some of this balance of $279. And Brian, if I think back when we adopted, maybe it was 150 to 170 we were for sure thinking of. That's kind of what I'm feeling the number was when we, but it was within that 279. Restricted for streets, 508,000. This is last year's number. I will be reconciling this when we get ready for the audit now. But that is state aid specifically restricted for streets. And as we do our projects, we apply that to various projects. But it is restricted. We can only spend it on streets or street maintenance. Public safety, we received the public safety aid at the end of 2023. Those were one-time dollars. We have $225,000 remaining in our cash balance that will be used, again, state restricted for public safety, police and fire. Our state housing aid, we received $200,000. That, again, state aid, restricted for housing, and that looking at being used for the gap on the Checkers property. So purchased that property for $950, received a grant for $640,000, leaving the $300,000+, of which this $200 is going to be used to fund that gap on that. And then the mill parking lot purchase. Over with the redevelopment of the Red River milling over here, we started budgeting in '24, $32,000 a year. We're going to budget that for 5 years. When we get that parking lot purchase closed, then these funds will be going from here in the 2025 budget, and we'll probably have to do an internal loan for the balance and pay that off over the last 3 years of levy for that. Okay, that's the general fund. Port Authority, we have $1 million in that fund, but $912,000, probably even tack on another $20,000 from the unrestricted operations. That's for the CBHH facility. That is state funds that we're holding for that facility and operation of that. And that's the Community Behavioral Health Hospital out by Lakeland Mental Health. So it leaves around $100,000 for Port Authority general operations. Public Library, we have $636,000, $150 there for the building. And you can see the operating budget for the library is just over $1 million. So same story as the general fund. We need money at the end of the year to cash flow. Bigwood Event Center, $124,000 used for that facility. And of course, we've talked about how we're funding that and how we're doing some transfers from the liquor store to balance that as well. Community Ice Arena Fund, those are capital funds for the arena, restricted for that, $290. The various tax abatement funds and TIF funds, those are regulated by those various tax abatement and TIF agreements. Revolving loan funds, we mentioned that at the retreat. Those are funds that can be used for economic development and business loans, $2.3 million in those various funds. And they have USDA regulations, deed, and then our downtown loan program, which has a little bit more freedom on those funds. Then some other under special revenue, Charter Commission, RTC, donor restricted funds. Those are for, the donor restricted are for parks, Lake Alice being the larger one on that one. All the debt service funds, they're all restricted per the bond documents for $2.4 million in that. Capital projects funds, just over $3 million in the operations fund. That would be unspent bond proceeds on those projects that we have underway. It's actually higher than that because we have some receivables. For instance, on the dairy property, we're going to have $1.2 million when we complete that sale. We'll be bringing that back to you between the port and the city. Then we can get grant dollars in. All that to say we have a number of receivables from the state of Minnesota. So actually this bond proceeds portion would be higher then. That would be unspent. Again, all restricted. The next one, PIR projects, those are under Minnesota Statute 429. So we have $1,088,000 there, have to be spent to pay off the various bonds. We transfer those up to debt service funds. And about $500,000 of it can be used on street projects, but they have to fall under the 429 statute. And we do that. We applied some of those funds to the Summit Linden Laurel project and the Stanton Avenue project. So we didn't bond as much. We used some cash for those. And the airport, it's negative because we have receivables, state and federal money to come in. Lynn, next. The enterprise funds, the liquor store, I have all that as unrestricted because that acts much like general funds. Those funds come in, we transfer, large transfers each year to the general fund to bring taxes down. We moved $400,000 in past years to the downtown riverfront phase 1, $200,000 to NP Park. But here we're transferring to the Bigwood right now. So we're using funds for that. We're going to update the point of sale system at the liquor store. And we'll talk at some point probably this year about the downtown store. Do we do a facelift, a building, refresh on the outside of that? We've talked about that in the past, but we'll kind of resurrect that discussion a bit. So we're watching that, but there is money there for other projects as we look at in the future. Then the refuse fund, sewer, water, storm, all those by state law and our city code have to be spent on the refuse fund, the sewer, the water, the storm. You couldn't pull funds from there, to put it into streets or into the police department. They are restricted for use, what those funds were generated for. The equipment fund, again, that's our revolving fund for our equipment. So we're purchasing all our equipment there and not issuing debt for that. So that's the revolving fund. All the other funds pay into that to purchase equipment. The employee's insurance is negative. All the funds, that's just a pass-through account. Then we pay Lakes Country Service Co-op. So right after the 1st of January, the funds came in from all the departments, processed and made that whole again. So that is fine. And then we have trust and agency funds. A number of them you can see are donor restricted. And then the large one here, $2.8 million, is Financial Assurance Agency Fund. Those are funds that we earned while we ran the burner up at the state hospital, burned all the garbage. As we were putting ash out into the old landfill, you needed to match revenues and expenditures. So put that money away so we care for that old landfill for the next 30 years with these funds. Now, they are restricted by state statute. So we do monitoring wells, cap maintenance and whatnot. And then to get reimbursed from our own fund, we do have to get state authorization. Once we get that, we move that cash then, say if it's $40,000 for a year, over to the refuse fund. Contingency reserve, these are insurance dividends. This is probably about 4 years, 3-4 years worth of dividends in here. These are unrestricted and we could use those for anything. They are here kind of segregated if we, had a really high insurance increase, which remember last year we actually had a decrease, so that was super good news. But they are here to level that out if we need at some point. We can also use those funds for something else as well. They are unrestricted and under the control of the council. And then the last section is fiscal host. So you can see we have PEG access. Business development for Fergus Falls has 2 funds. One being a little bit of operating funds that's left over from when the EIC was operating. We basically have been paying some insurance premiums out of this for BDFF. Visit Fergus Falls is here. And then the BDFF loan fund of $384,000. And I believe we have a committed loan for $200,000 that will be going out of that for the mill project. So that was, I guess I have it all unrestricted because it is their funds. It's not city funds. It's under their control. So there we go. I just wanted to give you that to show you how the city funds are divided up, what they're there for, and what they're restricted for. If you have any questions right now, I can. I know that's a lot to digest at this, and we can certainly talk about this again.
What is the Tricentennial Expendable Trust?
So that was set up years ago, probably at the bicentennial. I think I have some old records on that they did a fundraising campaign. So there's money there for the city's tricentennial. So that'll be there long after, we're not putting any funds in there. They're just being held and earning interest on that. So it's to have a tricentennial celebration at one time.
Is there any way that, like, some of them we could clean up, like the $675 at the golf course? I mean, as opposed to having to kind of manage an account with, like $200 in it and $450 in it.
We certainly can. I mean, we can say, golf course, do you want this? And we just send them a check over and we close it out. They've always requested we keep that open in case in the future they want to do some other fundraising.
Right.
Because that fund was used back when the golf course expansion happened. Then what was that, in the mid-90s maybe? I'll look at Jim.
Somewhere in that area.
Where the golf course raised basically half and the city put in half for that expansion. Their half went through this fund, as well as other various improvements over the years.
My understanding now, though, is that the golf course does have a 501c3 rating, so they could actually put that into their account and not have to use the city anymore. The
Yep.
reason they used the city was because the money went there, then you could deduct it off your taxes. Otherwise, just giving to the golf course, it wasn't deductible.
Yeah.
So it's been a number of years, maybe 3-4 years since any activity happened in that fund, but yeah, like sister cities, we're not doing much with that anymore, but
Yeah.
and some of these, so when we get to the audit presentation in June, some of these funds get rolled together. So like the general fund will include that community arena fund, the fire department fund down here in the trust and agency, the tricentennial will actually go in with that. And that's accounting standards that they're not restricted from an accounting standards standpoint for reporting. So you'll see the cash balances look different in the audit report because we start combining some of these together, roll them up in for the general fund in particular. And the library as well, like this restricted one for the library building, down here of $418,000. In the audit report, that gets combined with Fund 222 and gets reported there because they're for the library.
Any other questions of Bill?
Okay, then we'll turn it over to Mike and you can go over our performance a little bit.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
So all these monies that we have here are invested, and the good news is we can actually earn some interest now versus a few years ago when interest rates were almost zero. So what you see here is a graph of the market value of the long-term part of these funds. Of the $50 million you have, $30 million of this is put into a longer-term portfolio. It's invested in bonds that are about 5 years in maturity to earn a little bit more interest. If you go to the next page, all of this money is governed by, we have an investment policy statement that I think you have received a copy of that today. and should have had it in the past as well. This investment policy statement describes how these investments are invested, and it's restricted by Minnesota state statute as far as what can be held. And the investment policy describes the various parties and the responsibilities. So this is City Council. City Council, we annually review the performance and compliance of this report, like we're doing now. You approve and adopt the policy, any changes over time. The investment committee that meets quarterly reviews performance. We have the responsibility on the committee to recommend any changes to you. Then there are two parties involved. The company I'm with is an independent investment consultant. So one of our responsibilities is to guide the investment committee on how this should be invested. And then, like Bill mentioned, Galliard is the firm out of Minneapolis that actually makes the investments day to day. Investment performance, we have this graph. This year we've earned total return of $800,000. And you can see that in the middle of the graph, I wanted to address this as I did a couple years ago when the market value of the securities went down. Call your attention to the graph on the bottom, and if you recall, if you went to the left of the graph and go back to 2008, we went through a long period where interest rates were nearly zero. Back in 2018, 19, interest rates came up a little bit, but then went back down to zero. And then COVID happened, and inflation took off, and interest rates went up very fast, very quickly. And that's why you see in 2021, and especially 2022, the total market value of the portfolio went down. $2.7 million is a very big loss, but it's not a loss in principal value. It's just reflecting the market value of the securities. Because if you go back to like 2019 and 2020, the interest that was earned on the portfolio was only about $150,000. But you can see the value of the portfolio went up $1.5 million. It's because interest rates are going down. When interest rates go up, then the value of the bonds go down. So we've been taking a steady course, staying with conservative 5-year on average bonds and earning a decent rate of return. But as these market rate changes and interest rates occur, you're going to see pretty big swings like we have with the market value of the securities. The good news now is that we're earning 5% interest on all this money. In the past, when we looked at these reports, not that many years ago, we were looking at a rate of about 1%. So things are better now. You should be able to earn money, interest on your money. Any questions on this? I think one thing that we discuss, did anyone have a question?
Yeah, Your Honor. This might be off topic. What are you anticipating interest rates to do in the future?
Interest rates are expected to, at the short term, that's controlled by the Federal Reserve, it's expected to slowly go down over the next year or so. But the market, all the investors in the world control the rates for a 5-year and the longer term rates. Those are expected to stay pretty steady. So one of our decisions at the investment committee level is, what should we do? Should we invest the money in a money market fund? It's safer. You can avoid these fluctuations, but you get a lower rate of return. And if the Federal Reserve decreases interest rates, then you go lockstep along with that. So I think that projections, the Federal Reserve has hundreds of very smart people on staff, and nobody saw any of this coming. And they thought that inflation would gradually increase and rates would gradually increase. Rates went up very quickly. But we think that rates will stay pretty steady from here. But there are many things going on in the world that could change that. Plenty of things.
But if rates go down, your bond portfolio is going to go up.
Correct. Yeah.
And I don't know what the mix is between your bonds and cash.
Yeah, there's some money that's in the 4M fund, that's in a money market fund. And that's something we talk about at the investment committee, that if this is truly long-term money, we have no expected need for quite a while, that we add to this long-term portfolio.
Thank you.
Mike, did you want to just address the kind of like that drawdown in 2022, or Bill? That was kind of obviously where you took money out.
Yeah,
No,
that's,
that, you mean that negative 2.7?
Yep.
That was the loss in value he was saying. So that wasn't a drawdown, but a loss in value, but it was unrealized. So we didn't sell the investments. And as city governments, we mark our investments to market every month. So that's an accounting standard. We adjust to the market value each month. So we recognize that if we went back to that audit report in 2022, you'd see that performance. And we'll see that, for instance, when I bring our utility analysis back, you'll see a loss in the sewer fund for that year. But again, that has been coming back. And again, it was just on paper. We did not sell those. Now, Galliard has shifted some of them out as they are buying investments with higher interest rates, right? Is that a?
yeah, bonds mature. Good news is when they mature, you're investing at a higher rate. So right now, your interest rate on all of this money is about 5%. And not that long ago, it was 1%. So the good news is going forward, you're going to be earning a higher rate of return, $1.5 million. To this point about all these fluctuations, when you look back at 2019, there was about $150,000 of interest received that year. But why did the portfolio go up $1.5 million? That was because of changes in interest rates and the securities being adjusted accordingly. So normally you don't see these kind of big numbers. If you look back at the history of this for 25 years, you see nothing close to this because interest rates went up so quickly. Usually that happens gradually.
Unique times. Unique times.
Yeah, many times. And there's definitely a lot of risks to be concerned about. These are government bonds. So unless the government defaults, you're not going to default, or you're going to get your money back. And like I keep saying, at least now we're getting 5% interest rates. If interest rates go up, we're not going to see these kind of losses because we're earning interest that will buffer some of the losses. So Galliard is the firm that is doing the day-to-day management. And I'm showing here is the annualized returns over different cumulative periods of time. This last year, they earned 2.6%. We compare them to a benchmark at 2.1%. So over time, they've done a nice job of adding some value after their management fee. The management fee for Galliard is really low, and that's great. It's 0.15%, and so we compared that to 176 other institutional money managers that do something similar to Galliard, and they are the lowest of that group. And then lastly, the investment policy compliance. We have responsibility to report to you that investments are in compliance with the investment policy statement.
Anybody got additional questions of Mike? Scott, have you got anything to add as representative on the investment committee?
What I've heard today is essentially the same as what we reviewed at our meeting on Friday. And so I appreciate the review because it helps me understand it all that much better. But thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Great, thanks.
The next item on the agenda is capital update plan and utility rates. Call upon Bill.
Thank you so much. So my update, this will only take a few seconds because we talked briefly at the retreat that we had about the capital improvement plan, went through some of those items on there. And so I'm going back now and going to study the utility rates a bit more, and we'll bring that back to a future meeting. So we are going to bring before you the plan that, has been before you. That's that more accelerated plan. So analyzing that, and then we'll discuss that more when we come back with you as a council. How does that look for utility rates? And then, we'll bring in what would that look like for property tax impacts as well. So it's in the process. I mean, we just had our retreat on Friday, and so now I need to study that a bit. So it may be at the February 26th, we're thinking. And then we can also work on this in March. But if we're going to make some changes, we need to decide that in March because we need to implement any changes in April. That's when we reset the sewer rates, and then we would do water and storm at the same time. So more to come on that, but that's all I have today. Just an update that we're working on it. So,
Your Honor, can I ask a question?
Sure.
There's been a lot of public eye on the Fargo rate increases for their park district things, their pool passes, and their golf course. That is causing some questions, I think, amongst constituents on what we're going to be charging for rates. I think the negative press that's going on in Fargo is unfortunate, but the cost of the times is a reality too. Is there someone looking at how to keep these rates affordable for our citizens? Because I think there's some concern now that that's been in the news on what we're going to be charging, because I've had some questions.
So like on the aquatic center in
Yes.
particular?
Yep.
Yes, we are looking then on that, and I know right now you and Mike are working on that as well from all the staffing sides. So, and I know we had a base kind of laid out from the consultants through that architect firm. So we're starting with that, looking at what the other areas are, and so refreshing that as we head towards spring as well. So that'll be coming before you as well.
I think families are trying to figure out their budgeting too a little bit if they're planning on doing that. So I think
Sure.
not having this be right before it opens might be
Yep.
helpful to families.
Your Honor,
Yeah.
I'll just say for an update, the park board did look at the rates that Mike actually put together, and they're gonna look it over through the next month and then come with a recommendation in March.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
To
you.
ease some concerns, Your Honor, the numbers that we are working with are significantly less.
Good
than
deal.
You see
Yeah.
coming out of the news in Fargo.
Good deal.
I don't want to say a number out loud in the event that it shifts, 10% one way or the other, but it's significantly less than what Fargo has put out in the last week.
Okay.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the joint powers agreement for BCA background checks, and Mike Hartwell will address that.
Good morning, Your Honor, and members of the City Council. You have before you a copy of the Joint Powers Agreement. That agreement is required for non-police agencies such as my department to access federal criminal data and background information on candidates. We have several positions that require fingerprinting, and this allows me to actually decipher and receive the criminal background check from the BCA. We are audited annually, and this is a requirement per the audit to have on file that it is approved by the council and by the city administrator. Any questions?
Would somebody care to make a motion?
So
I'll
moved.
offer that.
I
Thank
can
you,
second
Jim.
that.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Laurel.
Mike, can I ask you a question? Sure. Is this any different than what you've done in the past? What is the change for 2025, or is this exactly the same as what you've entered in the past?
Exact same.
Any other questions of Mike? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against, same sign. Hearing none, the motion is approved. Everybody good with that on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 522 East Hampton Avenue, Clara Beck. This was to look at the comps on other land that was sold similar to this?
Yeah, council requested that we get some comps for 522 Hampton to do some discussion. I reached out to 4 different real estate agents. The 2 whose data you have in your packet are the 2 who got back to me in time to present that information. Wayne Schuett was one of the realtors, and Ryan Hansen from Ryan Hansen Homes was the other realtor. Wayne Schuett came in and talked to me in my office about his findings and reiterated in person that that he believed that the market rate for that lot would be between 10,000 and 15,000. He said anything closer to like 21,000 or even above that would be, and these were his words, setting a new precedent for Fergus Falls. And then he also used the words location, 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 which I think we've all heard from realtors before, but he just wanted council to remember that when looking at this lot. So I don't know how many questions I can necessarily answer because I am not a real estate agent, but I'm happy to help facilitate conversation on what direction you'd like to go with 522 Hampton.
Any questions of Clara?
Your Honor?
Laurel?
You said by the time for the packet, this is all you got. Did you get any more sense the packet, or is this all the information you're sitting with?
This is what I have, yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So Ryan Hansen was the one that obviously sent the documentation on.
Nope, Wayne's is in there as well.
Right.
Yeah, both of them.
Any questions of Clara? There's not really questions, it's like direction, I suppose.
Just kind of a general housekeeping question for you, Your Honor. How do we go from closed session real estate to open session now, talking about a price for real estate? Is that kind of the norm, or is this just how it rolls? Or I'm looking for clarification, how we went from closed session to open session without a price
I
yet.
don't think we're negotiating price. I don't think we're not selling it today.
Oh, okay.
So do we want some direction as to where we go with this?
And, Your Honor, that direction could be to bring this back to closed session to then take the next step. And to further answer the question that Councilman Mortensen just asked, because the motion was done in open session to direct us to bring these numbers back, these really aren't protected in the sense that they're not a negotiation. But now I think from here would be appropriate to do that.
I'd make a motion that we take this to a closed session.
Second.
Thank you, Laurel. Thank you. Seconded by Al, was that? No. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those against, same sign. The motion is approved, and we can see if we can get that on, is it Monday or Tuesday? Tuesday's agenda. The next item on the agenda is the administrative update by Andrew.
Yeah,
City
thank you.
Administrator.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members, Mayor Hicks has kind of asked, or has asked, that from time to time we give updates as departments. And so what we've kind of put together is a schedule where there's going to be one department of the city in front of you each month at a committee of the whole throughout the entirety of the year. So it'll be kind of a cyclical basis. And I'm going first for a couple of reasons. One, to be the guinea pig and to, just realize that we're going to create a format and some of those things. But 2, alphabetically, administration comes first, so don't read too far into that. But I will say that my update, or the administration update, is probably going to be the most boring one. And there's 2 reasons for that. One, a lot of the things that we do, you guys have already had your hands on. You've seen, this is what we're talking about at city council meetings, which is probably not always the case when we're talking about the water department or the library, some of the things that are more out of the public eye. So you'll learn a lot more from other people that you haven't heard than you will from me. And then secondly, we work with every department on a daily basis on all the projects, whether it's investment committee, budget, projects that we have going on. And I'm not going to rain on our staff's thunder. I'm going to certainly allow them to talk about their initiatives and the things they're working on and be the ones to present those things. So I'm going to try not to step on anybody's toes. And because of that, mine's going to certainly be a lot more boring than ones that come after me. And I'm just okay with that. I hope you guys are as well. So I'll run through a couple of things that the administration department is either working on actively, finished up, or has forthcoming. I've got about 10 things I'm going to touch on, and then certainly hope that there's questions or additional dialogue. Obviously, you all know 2024 was a busy year with elections. There were 4 elections that took place in Fergus Falls, and Len being the key election official in Fergus Falls, we had significant time and energy that went into that. Also, many of the new members, whether you came on now or in the past, you realize there's a lot of work that goes into orientation and onboarding, all of those things. The retreat, which is typically something we do at Q1 when we have turnover, that just happened last Friday. For the benefit of the media and others, we're going to give a recap on Tuesday night at the city council meeting about the retreat. So we'll bring more then. I'm not going to do that right now. But that did happen last Friday, and by all accounts, it was really a good session or a good starting point for us. So a lot of work goes into that people probably don't see. But certainly we've spent a lot of time with council in the last couple of months, and a lot of those kind of reorg, transitional type things. Westridge Mall, I'm not going to spend much time talking about that today, but it's something that we've spent considerable time on over the last few years, really, in conversations with various entities, businesses out there, Marty Graff himself, and that kind of is continuing to work through the process that everybody's aware of. Bigwood Event Center, this is kind of a big topic. Recently, the city council directed staff to explore potential sale or reuse of this facility and what that may mean for the community in light of the hotel that's attached to it being on the market. And a couple of things that I'll mention there. Staff has done some research into what a sale may look like, implications of a sale related to state bonding dollars and some of those things, which the council has. And also, I've been in touch with the broker of the hotel for a couple of reasons. One, to understand, what the goals of the hotel group are, and to understand if there's been any traction or interest. But 2, there was some conversation about the way the property was marketed. Some of the spaces that are on the listing were assets that are owned or controlled by the city. And I want to just, I wanted the broker to be clear that they're going to have a disappointed buyer if they buy this under the current pretenses and then something were to change. So I've had some of those conversations, haven't had a lot of real great feedback or engagement related to that from the broker. It was pretty short, and thanks for that information, and continue to market the property in the most appropriate way. So I didn't get a lot of insight there, and we can have additional dialogue about that, I think, when we come back to the council with what potential options we're looking at related to our space at the Bigwood, which, to Councilmember Mortensen's point, is likely a closed session topic where we started that. So you want to add anything to that, Mayor? I know you were, did I cover that okay for you?
Yeah, thank you. No, I just wanted to get an update out there. Obviously, it's been a couple of weeks.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. The dairy property, this is a joint effort, of course, with a lot of different departments, but we received a $4 million state bonding a few years ago on this property. We're getting real close to getting some of that money in the door. You're going to see before you in the next, hopefully, weeks, just one of the next 2 meetings or so, a purchase agreement that sells the river buffer parcel, which is the river frontage on that site, from the Port Authority to the city. And that transaction will trigger $1.2 million reimbursement from the state, which is part of our funding related to the dairy project. The remaining dollars, $1.3 million, are slated for railroad crossings, which are actively being discussed with the railroad. And then the remaining balance of those funds, what's left after those 2 expenditures, go towards the construction of that river buffer trail that's along the riverfront. When that's all said and done, the $4 million will likely be gone, and but if not, the legislation was written in a way that any excess funds could be used for other amenities on the site, whatever that might be that the city council desires. Former Checkers property, I think I let everybody know when it happened, but right at the tail end of the year, we closed on that. That project went fairly well. Brian did a great job overseeing that in relation to the owner and the cleanup. And now we're working at finalizing the deed grant. We submitted all the documents. I anticipate we'll have the money any day. They're going to be doing a site visit next week.
They won't give the money till after the site visit,
There
on
you
the
go.
20th.
We're doing the site visit on the 20th where they verify that everything we've submitted is accurate and that the project is done. The money will be in the door. And then Bill mentioned the 200,000 plus in housing aid that will be come before the council to be put towards that project. And then ultimately focus on reuse of that property and what it looks like related to housing opportunities. And the reason that, again, housing is part of that conversation is because the grant from deed and then these housing dollars are specific to housing. So there's going to have to be some sort of housing on that property.
Well, is there kind of restriction on the type of housing, or it can't be it just can't be industrial or retail?
Yeah, I mean,
The deed funds, no, technically no restriction. The state funds are specific to, it's state affordable housing aid is the actual title of the funding. There are some ways that you can change what affordable means based on how the council responds. So we can pass a resolution at some point that says that they can be used in certain ways, but it always remains specific to housing.
Your Honor, a question on that. Can it be a PUD down there with those bondings? That's okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that would be fine.
And then can we get some clarification for the public on, it's my understanding from talking, I think, to Andrew and Clara, that that loan or that grant from the city or from the state for 640, we at this point have been told with development, we don't have to pay that back. Is that accurate? And so we can have that out there and so people know that?
yeah, Your Honor, Councilmember Kilby, exactly. We originally, when the grant agreement was sent to us, it said in there, any transaction you make, the money has to go back to the state. We spent probably 3 or 4 months going round and round with the state, and they ultimately removed that provision. So if we do sell the property, we do not have to return the proceeds to the state. And the reason that we got them to agree to that is because the deal that we had put together didn't work if we had to give up the proceeds of the land sale, because the land sale was going to be what funded the gap on the project. So they agreed with that, and so any sale that we do of that property, we retain the proceeds. Yeah. Yeah, good question. Pebble Lake Golf Course Management Agreement, I bring this up because we did a kind of a stopgap measure at the end of 2024 on a 1-year term. We need a permanent solution here. And so I know, with holidays and the beginning of the year, there hasn't been a lot of traction, but we're going to likely in earnest in the next few months here start a discussion on, does it make sense to try to put a deal together for acquisition, or are we looking at more of a longer term lease agreement with the Pebble Lake Golf Club? I know Councilmember Layton is the liaison to that, and they recently met for the first time for the year, I think, and haven't met yet.
It was canceled.
Oh, it was, okay, I hadn't heard that. So hopefully these discussions get some traction sooner than later, but the council's gonna have to resolve kind of a longer term, whether it's, again, acquisition or management lease at some point this calendar year, so we don't do the limp along year at a time. Economic development conversations,
Flip the slide, Andrew.
what's that?
Oh, do you have another slide?
It's on there.
No, I'm on number 2.
Oh, you're still on number 2.
This is a second slide of 1 to 5.
Right, okay.
We couldn't figure out the numbering. But yes, thank you for keeping me on track.
No, that's all right. I just it still says 1, 2, and 3. And he's talking about number 6.
We monkeyed with this yesterday and couldn't figure out the numbering, so we just had to go for it because we ran out of time. But number 2, the second time, looking at what is the role or future of Greater Fergus Falls in relation to where the council's going with economic development. And I think that we started that discussion in great earnest on Friday of last week at the retreat. And again, we'll recap that a little bit more on Tuesday. But, understanding that there's not somebody in that role today. Economic development has a gap in our community today. We have to get the resolution here, and that's why I put this on the list. A couple more internal things. We recently launched a new website, and with that website, we are hoping that there's a more user-friendly experience to people that are visiting our website. We see a lot of traffic online. People continue to want to shift their habits to convenience and online and not having to come into City Hall or call City Hall. Our IT system updates this year will further enhance that experience and be more user-friendly. And also with our new website, we saved a considerable amount of money. So we feel like we kind of accomplished a few different things by going in that direction. Anytime you launch a new website or you make a transition on an IT system or anything else, there's going to be things that are missed or fall through the cracks, and we continue to experience that now. So if people see any broken links or anything, let us know.
Under that public interaction, we have a way for people to submit a comment or a concern or a compliment. We haven't got many of those, but we are getting about 3 to 4 different people replying to the city about concerns that they have on a daily basis. So it has been an effective way to speak, to have the public tell us what's going on.
Can the council get kind of a monthly summary of what you're hearing on things? Like, to me, I think it'd be nice to kind of have a sense of what's being talked about by the community members.
Most of it's neighbors
Okay.
talking about, I wish my neighbor would shovel
Okay.
their sidewalk, or
Okay.
let their bird have their dog.
But if there's wider things that are coming in, I mean, even every couple months, even if it's phone calls or whatever, I mean, it would be nice to see some of that feedback.
Yeah, a lot of them too are like, I got one earlier this week. I shouldn't say this. A lot of times they are, we want Chick-fil-A, Olive Garden, all the different things, and you should do it in this space that the city doesn't own. And, so it's things like that where it's like, well, okay, we can respond to that, right? But that's what a lot of it is people that are dreaming, and which is great. But then we explain kind of how some of those site selections happen and how companies operate.
So they do get answered.
Of course,
Okay.
of course, yep. Yep. We mentioned communication on here. Obviously, our communication director position is vacant, and we have not decided how we're going to move forward related to that, but I think it's worth noting as we try to continue to provide high-level communication as we're able with other things that are going on. But certainly, we're always open to suggestions. If anybody has any, how we can improve that as well. Licensing, I want to mention, because this is, it's fairly cyclical, but it takes up a lot of time. And food trucks, we're moving into that season. We have seen over the last few years just a great infusion of
We're getting close to 40.
about 40, and people are calling almost daily during the summer about inquiring on that. Cannabis is going to be a bigger one here in 2025 as we get closer and closer to the state being ready for that process. And then, liquor licensing is also, it's quite a process with the state and other entities, but I think we're looking at 2 new ones in the near future here as well. So just kind of a lot of moving parts related to licensing. Say anything more on that?
No, it's just, as they come up in the year, we just deal with them, and we have 2 new potential places looking at liquor. One's an established business already that's an ad liquor, and one's a new business looking to come in with liquor. So we're working with them as they go through the process.
And then last, but certainly not least, the thing that probably takes up the most of my time and is probably the core function of our department is just supporting day-to-day and overseeing day-to-day operations. With 120 plus full-time equivalent employees, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of personalities, there's needs, there's concerns, there's things that have to happen. We do swell to about 200 during the summer with seasonal and part-time employees, and you can quickly eat up a day or two as issues arise on any given day or week. And those are the things that you guys hopefully never have to deal with or see or hear about. But, when you're working with people, things happen, and that's what we spend a lot of time managing. So, again, I told you, I warned you up front, these aren't real exciting. You've probably seen most of them. You're going to learn a lot more from our people that are out, boots on the ground, doing some of those core functions and services of the city, and I look forward to you hearing all of that. The other thing that Mayor Hicks mentioned is this is a good opportunity for departments or city staff to, reflect with the council on ways they can help or assist or what resources that we may need. And Lynn and I took kind of a stab at this. And I'll explain kind of what these bullet points mean. One of the things that we always say is we don't want any surprises, and I hope that we never surprise you all. What I want to do is inundate you with information. You probably notice we send a lot of emails, or if there's things that are addressed to the city council, I forward them on, a lot of times without comment, sometimes with comment. You guys, I trust, can sift through that and see what's important to you and use that how you feel is necessary. But if there's ever anything, likewise that the council's hearing out there related to staff or operations, I'd certainly appreciate the two-way communication and trying to avoid surprises on this end as well. So that's just, I don't have any concern related to this. It's just a general, how can we work best together? And that's just good communication and open sharing. I think this is talked about a lot. Ways in which staff can really understand and feel supported is by getting clear direction. This was brought up, I think, by somebody at the retreat. And the best way to do that is, with motions and resolutions. So if there's something that the council wants to see or understand, I would encourage you to make the motion and get a majority to say so. What's really challenging is when there's one member that, is maybe feeling different than the rest of the council, and they want us to explore that route, or they want us to go down that route, and then we have to kind of step back and say, but the direction of the council was counter to that. And now we've disappointed that one individual. So just trying to manage all of that is much easier when the council collectively can say, no, this is the direction we're going. This is what we want staff to do or to bring back. It just makes it a lot easier. And then frankly, it speeds things up. So we're not trying to guess and then we have to come back again with something different. So, and then this last bullet point, this is not pointed at anybody individually, but we have heard from a number of people over the last, Lynn hears probably more than I do, but from a number of people over the last few months and years really, that they'll call or email or reach out to their council members and they don't get a response. So they're frustrated with that and they take that out on us or they ask us how they can get a hold of all of you. So just a good reminder that people do, to your question, Councilmember Mortensen, they do appreciate and expect a response. Whether it's from staff or council members when they inquire. So that's not putting anybody on blast. That's just, the feedback that we hear is, a lot of times they'll call us with ideas or comments or questions, and the appropriate response from our point of view is, contact your elected officials or contact your city council members. And then when they say, well, we've done that, or we've called them, or we've done this, we've reached out and they haven't responded, then we're kind of at a dead end, right? So just again, nobody on blast, want people to be mindful of that. And that's how I think the council can help our department in relation to smooth transactional business with the public.
Thank you.
I was the guinea pig, so take it easy on me, but is there any questions?
Yeah. Can we go back to the first 1 through 5? I think, okay, yeah. Number 5 there, the former Checkers property, and then it was the second group, the number 2, which was the economic development Greater Fergus Falls. Both of those were talked about at the retreat. And there was some discussion and there was some advice maybe that was given. And it had to do with housing at the Checkers, that the presenter that was with us that day, if you recall, wasn't real favorable on that, just because he thought there would have been a better use for that land. And I believe it was talked about when that was first approached as worker housing, which I don't like that term. I think it's a derogatory term, it can be. I think I even used the word socialistic at the retreat. I think we need to really rethink that, because I don't think,
as a professional person who presented that day, didn't think that was a good idea necessarily. I think we really need to look into that, along with the way Greater Fergus Falls is moving or not moving. And I think those two things are very important. That was discussed. And that was about the only things that we did really kind of discuss a little bit during that retreat. And I'd like to see that focus really on those two, because if we're going to make some economic development, we're going to have to look at those two things right away. And there's other properties too that should be looked at, because those are prime real estate, along with the dairy project and land. So I think we need to really focus on what we are going to do as far as economic development, get the appropriate person or people involved, and move forward as soon as we can on that. So I would like to start to, at some point in time here in the very near future, start talking about that. And I don't know if that's open or closed meetings or how that has to be, but I would like to see that coming, because this year will be gone soon.
Yes.
And we need to make some major decisions on how the city is going to move forward. Thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Graymeyer, Mayor. A couple of things. I agree with you, and this is maybe tied into what I just said of, we take direction from the council. So the previous council wanted to look at workforce housing on that site. If this council has a different vision for that site, great. We need that direction. I am working closely, Lynn and I, with Mayor Hicks to schedule some very near future work sessions or I think you used the word mini retreat or follow-up retreat. And I think we're all on the same page related to what the important topics are. And that is, first and foremost, in my mind anyway, economic development. Agree with you completely. And then if the Checkers site is, the top of mind site that the city council wants to focus on, let's talk about what that looks like. The reason I wanted to bring it up today, beyond not pushing housing or anything, but to indicate that we're closing in on the funding, but then also just to, I don't think I ever, maybe I did, I don't recall if I ever publicly said we actually closed on the site. I know it was right before Christmas, or right between Christmas and New
January
Year's.
2nd.
January 2nd, right after New Year's, yeah, it was like right at the holiday time. And I know I pushed it out to staff and council, but I wanted to make sure I publicly said it as well. But
It was just a comment I wanted
Yeah.
to make, but what I'd like to do is let's set a time right now. Let's set a meeting. Let's set a mini retreat or whatever we can do. Otherwise it goes to the next week, and then it goes to the next week and the
We're
next
gonna
week.
email out some dates to see that
Thank you.
they meet.
we're getting together tomorrow morning to set the schedule.
Yep.
So hopefully
Perfect.
that's 24,
Good.
30 hours. We'll have it.
Good.
And then basically, in addition to that, was basically the work sessions to try to knock off some of the lower hanging fruit.
Is that like communications?
Yeah, like communications, kind of, go through the list of RFPs and some of those things so that, we can knock those out, separately and leave the bigger ones. I think also in terms of economic development, we talked a little bit about that. I think we need to kind of at least make a resolution of whether we are or are not going to support Greater Fergus Falls this year.
I'm ready to do that right now.
So that we get that, and we're going to put that up, as a follow-up on the retreat agenda, on the retreat update Tuesday, so that then it's official, so that will get done. And then likewise, obviously, where are we going to go next? Obviously, yes, there's opportunity with Dan and Lisa, but also, Councilmember Mortensen's got a contact in West Fargo, and it would be good to have them bring a different perspective on how are they doing economic development versus the Bemidji model, which essentially was Greater Fergus Falls was modeled from. So at least get a different take on it. But I think everybody's mindful.
Thank you, Your Honor. One question for you, Andrew. Some of the grant funding you're talking about for affordable housing, different things, some state, I'm not aware of what they are exactly, but are we tied to those? I mean, we have to take those. Is there a timeline on them? Can we say, hey, thank you very much, and that's not the route we want to go?
Yes and no. Let me try to explain. So the 640,000 odd number is the energy transition grant through deed. The way we wrote the application was related to well, a couple different ways. We used a couple different angles. One was workforce housing, one was creation of tax base, and then the cleanup of a dilapidated property, right? Those were kind of the three angles. We would need if we're not gonna, if that property doesn't include housing of some sort that would create tax base and opportunities. And the reason we use the term workforce housing, and it was market rate housing. I want to be clear, the project was market rate. It wasn't subsidized or affordable. But the reason we use those buzzwords that the state likes to use is because one of the ways this program was really targeted was ways in which we support existing employers. And so the argument we made in our application was we need to provide additional opportunities for of housing that will support our employers by being at an income level that, you know, an entry-level job could afford. And again, that's market rate, and that's why some of them bought into that. So if we go too far off of that vision, there's probably going to be some questions that Dean wants clarification on as to why the money was used differently than the application. Now, I don't think it's real black and white, like you're eligible, you're not. It's going to be some negotiation or conversation about how this meets the goals of that program and how our application ties in. The second pot of money, the state housing aid, was just a new program, 2 years during that major surplus time where they were creating programs and spending. I'm going to be choose my words very carefully here. And the target of that program, because of, I think, the initiative of the majority party, was really focused on low-income housing. There were, like Clara was starting to mention, there were some language carve-outs or loopholes, I should say, where with a certain resolution of the governing body, hearing from employers in the community about housing needs, and I don't know the exact language, you could get away from the income requirements for that program. But there's some specific steps that have to happen. You do not have to utilize those funds. You could turn them over to the county. You could turn them back. You could use them elsewhere if there's a project that comes up. But if we're going to do housing in any form on this property, going through that resolution process and declaring those funds necessary but not for affordable housing, it's a really good funding source that really doesn't have strings attached to it that could close that gap.
Yeah. Okay, appreciate that.
So recognizing workforce housing, we have workforce that is Otter Tail Power, that is Lake Region Hospital. We have doctors that need places to live and all of those things too. To me, there should be some massaging of this that could go to fit if we want to do a multi-use structure that has retail, whatever, restaurants on the main floor and condos above. There should be some way to make things work, recognizing not all workforce housing has to be a lower price point.
There's not a doubt in my mind, Your Honor, Councilmember Killy, that we could make that argument and be succefful.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's the clarification.
And to be, I want to stress, like, market rate here is affordable in the sense that our rates are lower than other communities, but not subsidized in any way, and they're not going to dictate what the rents charged are. So if you create a product that even, you know, creeps up in terms of rent or price point, that's fine. I think you can still make the argument that you're providing housing opportunities for employers in Fergus Falls. And frankly, Lake Region Healthcare was one of the employers that was engaged, and I'm not going to speak publicly about what their needs are, but there's gaps in the housing inventory in Fergus Falls that they struggle with related to what their needs are as an employer, whether that be traveling nurses, temporary doctors, some of those things, where they don't have a lot of options. So there are a lot of conversations that have happened, should happen, and will continue to happen as it relates to what that product may look like.
And I think it's important as a council and as we work with the administrative department to take what we learned on Friday night, which was very clearly come up with what you want the package to be as a community, as a council, and then go find the developer versus just saying, we have dirt. And I think we need to start shaping things in a perspective of, this is the package we're looking for, how do we pull in the right people? And I think that's a mindset, at least personally, that we need to look very seriously at.
I want to come back around, Andrew, just to, and I think one of the things you said today that yours is, not your exact words, yours was boring, or yours wasn't a big presentation, or yours wasn't a thing. I think yours is the guide-on presentation. I think yours is a presentation that I've been yearning for. I've been yearning to hear that these things are on the docket, because I sit here and I don't know with it. One of the things I just want to know is, these are some major deals with Checkers and some of these other things, and even down to a liquor license for a new business. How engaged is Greater Fergus Falls with you, or are you engaged with them on every one of those aspects to have them utilize their skills or not?
Your Honor, Councilman Mortensen, today, not a lot of engagement between the organizations. In the past, there's been varying levels of engagement depending on the project. But without a staff person in that role, and with a board that's wondering what their role or how they can support or how this all fits together, there's not day-to-day interaction. And I don't want that to come off as me being critical necessarily of the board members, because I think the board is working very hard to identify how they can assist the community of Fergus Falls, whether that be in their current capacity or wherever the city goes. I think they would argue that they want to be part of whatever, resources or success that we need. But today there's no interaction. Those things are happening either organically or because they're being driven by people like Lynn, who pick up the requests as they come in, or our building department, who's working through permitting and inspections and that type of thing.
And I appreciate the candidness, and this is not here to bust up Greater Fergus Falls or do anything. Those are business individuals that are on that board. They're committed to our community just like everybody else. So what I would like to say is, I want Greater Fergus Falls to succeed. I want Greater Fergus Falls to be a part of our community for a long time. I want them to have a strong board. I want them to be able to come in front of the council. I want them to be able to work with us in every capacity that we can. But I am of the belief that if we as a city and as a council, we do not get economic development under our umbrella in-house, where you can have a person by your right-hand side, where Lynn can have a person by her right-hand side to work through these new businesses or things that need to be done, I think we're really missing the boat here. We really are. And so I'm ready, same as some of the other council members, to say, hey, we need to see as a council if we want to go forward and do that. And I'm hopeful that they will, as a council, bring economic development under our umbrella. I have kind of the groundwork and the template to help us do that to some extent. But then that person will work with Greater Fergus Falls as well to strengthen our city. This is not to crush Greater Fergus Falls in my mind at all. This is to make us better in many different ways, so you don't have to worry about that communication with there. So I don't know if that takes a motion. You asked for motions, which is important to do that. I made a motion the other day to make sure that the county was looking at that fire suppression, and that was the motion. Some of the council members said, hey, they're just going to do it anyways. But if you want motions, I would make a motion today that...
we were going to discuss Greater Fergus Falls on Monday night, so I don't know whether or not you want to make a motion now and then maybe.
Your Honor, you're stopping my motion?
No, just point to.
Okay, I think
you in whether or not you want to do it today, or whether you might have a different motion on Monday night.
I won't have a different motion, but I'll hold the motion for now until we have discussion. But I think everybody knows where I would like to go, one of 8, and I'm hopeful that this council will be with me, because I am so dedicated to this in this city, and I want people to succeed, and that's what we need to do. So I'll hold the motion.
Your Honor, I have a question going forward. thank you. Today was very helpful. I'd like to echo what Councilmember Mortensen said. Going forward, in light of the time of year that we're at and the building projects and things like that, I don't know if you're looking at doing these alphabetically or not, but in light of some other factors as well, I would love to see engineering in March. Brian, don't give me any daggers. Engineering in March. And honestly, it would be really helpful to me as a new person and maybe to others. I know Jason Schutzley as our building person is not a department head, but I think that we could all learn a lot from hearing what his update would be. I don't know if that's something that could happen in April outside of a department head situation, but I think that would be very helpful to the council as we look at economic development and infrastructure needs and things like that. Those two, from my personal perspective, would be helpful to have next.
Yeah, we can certainly make that happen. I will say this, there are some staff members that will be okay and they'll be comfortable with that. What I've committed to our staff, we had a quarterly operations meeting yesterday where we meet with all of our supervisors across the city. And what I've committed to them is they're not going to be here, necessarily, like there's anxiety in some people when they hear, I got to go before the council. That's not part of my job, right? And so the commitment I made to them was the department heads are going to be the ones presenting, but they can certainly invite people along, or if people want to join, I think that would be great. But I don't want to get to a point where we're saying this person needs to come before the council. Because I made that commitment to them yesterday that, they don't have to worry about a firing squad. Not it's implying that you guys are doing that, but when you're not used to standing at this podium, it can be pretty intimidating.
No, and I was just based on my conversation with Jason.
Yep.
I think he might have something, I know he falls underneath engineering, but there's a kind of a component of his that's a little different. That might be helpful for all of us.
He'll be just fine. Generally, I want to make the point that it would be best if we don't say like, hey, bring the water plant super. He might be fine. I'm just throwing that out there, but but I want the ability to connect with those individuals and make sure they're comfortable.
Absolutely.
Throw them up here. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Your Honor, you were talking about the low-hanging fruit. I'm going to look at the apples that are on the ground. Communication, Andrew, was a great thing. That communication, I've been talking about a call log forever. You get these conversations from constituents. It would be nice to take them back to the representative council person. Communications as well. Andrew talked about a new truck that the city bought and how we can express to the public the good things that we're doing. I think that would be an opportunity for that department head to bring them. We don't buy a new truck every year. We don't buy one every month. But those would be good things. No different than a picture of the staff when it's 35 below zero in a 8-foot hole fixing a main. I also heard that we have a new website. I think that's where we should focus. Andrew talked about, or Hicks talked about maybe an intern. We could sit here with 20 people and try to figure out what the best avenue is for marketing. I think we need to focus, number one, on the city council meeting, more information here, and with a new website, it should be there. We don't have to go to Facebook, we don't have to go to Tumblr, we don't have to go wherever. Focus right here, what we got. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, is what I'm trying to say. So just a couple bits there. Thank you. I appreciate your comments today.
Thank you.
Nothing else? Oh, Scott's got one.
I just wanted to point out this morning on my way, early morning meeting, really, really cold morning. And our city workers were out flooding the rink at Cleveland. And I appreciate their work out there this morning.
Thank you. I do too.
With that, the meeting is adjourned. I should probably just say that the council meeting is Tuesday, not Monday.